Okay, so for this first scramble, I have 6 bad edges on green front, 4 on red, and 4 on white, which sounds pretty good, but it turned out that I could only find 6 different 4-move edge orientations. And so I ended up writing 31 different 5-move edge orientations to give myself more options. And the one I ended up going with was a 5-mover on yellow front. So if you look, you got bad edges here, 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 and here. So these 4, they can be set up to the yellow face with B2, L prime, R prime, D. And before the R prime D, I did a U2 to extend that 4-mover into a 5-mover, then R prime D. Now I have immediately DR minus 4E4C. I've got this pair on the bottom, and then this column on the top with this edge facing this corner facing in the same direction as the column, which sometimes can be annoying, but because I have a pair, it's okay. Generally, people, when they see this, they'll set up to JZP or the 4-move DR trigger if it works out. But like the RF2, U2, R1. But for me, I just put this column adjacent to this pair with BD2. Then, because these are adjacent and I have a sole corner on this side, I can just connect it to this pair, giving me 2 columns as long as the middle slice edges line up correctly. So they did. I did F prime D2, F prime R for an 11-move DR. And then immediately I noticed that I was set up to like a 3-move trigger for the corners. But I wanted to check if this was legitimate. So I did a B prime U2 B, or just the 3 moves to check if I had like the really easy case. I didn't, so then I checked if I had parity on the really easy case. So I did a B2 L2 U2 L U2 R prime, and then look at that, I've got HDR corners. So I knew this was a super good DR because there's 11 moves to like a case that can theoretically be done in 3 moves. But I couldn't find any good setups to the 3-move trigger on this side. So I switched, and on this side of the scramble, it's just 4 more moves to HDR. I can do a U2 to set up the 2 columns. I don't have parity this time. Then F prime D2 F to get an HDR in 15 moves, which is pretty short. At least short enough to check floppy reduction, which is what I did. So first, I of course tried to like build some blocks on blue-green. Didn't really work out. I looked at red-orange as well because my last move on normal was an R. So because this is such a short HTR, I went for floppy. I noticed that like it was the floppy style case for corners where these 2 corners belong stacked on top of each other, but they're adjacent instead. So these is, of course, 2 moves to get them stacked onto each other. And this sort of case, if you have 4 bad edges, you want to set them up to like some sort of diagonal spots like this, because then it's either 3 or 4 moves to floppy reduction. And in this case, I have 3 bad edges here and 1 here, meaning I need to preserve that property that I was mentioning while getting like one of these 2 edges into the bottom spot. So I went for this edge. I did R2, U2, R2. Now I have my edges in the good spots. And then here I'm actually just 3 more moves to floppy. So I could do D2, L2, B2, gives me floppy reduction, and this variation of that floppy reduction gives me just 2 more moves to leave slice. After linearizing my solution and just doing the moves of the skeleton, so D2, B2, L2, D2, R2, U2, R2, F prime, D2, F, U2, it gives me three edges that need to cycle. So I tried widening some moves in that skeleton, and I noticed that if you just backtrack a couple moves, so right before the F prime or during the F prime, you can insert an S. So S, F prime, that adds 1 move. Then D2, F, S prime adds another move, and then U2. So that's a +2 rewrite of the slice, giving me a 24 on the first attempt. This next scramble is definitely harder to work with. It was a 666 for the edge counts, and I couldn't find any 4-move edge orientations. So I wrote down 35 move edge orientations and just started checking them. The one I ended up going with was on green front, white top. I have 6 bad edges, so these 3, and then these 3. Kind of hard to see, but I can do a B prime to reduce to 4 bad, which are now here, 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 and here. Then I did U, R prime, D to get them all in the back face, and then B to finish off. Here I immediately have DR minus 4C2E, which is a very good case. So I switched, brings me over here. Now, in order to solve this, I connected this corner to this pair with a B2, and then did a U, and then L2 to have like this corner facing in the same direction of the column. Kind of similar to last solve, except now I only have 2 edges, so I can set up to the 3 move trigger with a U2 L D2 L to solve a DR. This is a 12 move DR, and it's the same subset as last one. So 2 edges. If I do a slice move, you can see there are two bad edges and the same style of corners as last. So I know that this is a 12 plus 2. I ended up continuing on this side for a bit, so I reduced to 1 quarter turn 4C4E with L2, U2, R2, U. That was essentially just a parity fix and then a quarter turn of progress. Then I switched because I couldn't find anything on this side. Here there are a ton of variations to get to HDR in 4 more moves. Well, at least 4 of them. And the one I ended up, because you have these 2 columns, but so it's like almost like an R move away, but the middle slice doesn't really line up. Like my 2 middle slice edges are here. So in order to fix this, I can either do an F2 or a B2, essentially to get these columns on diagonal spots, then fix the middle slice, and then when I come back, I'll have just the 1 move trigger. So the one I went with was B2, R2, F2, D. That was an 18 move HDR, and I actually did the D in the wrong way, so D2 instead. Then I just tried to play around, build a second square in addition to this first one. Then I kind of just noticed this case to be something like easy. And here I can just do D2, F2 to give me this like pseudo floppy case where I can just do L2, F2, L2, U2 to get leave slice in 25, which I was able to slice out to a +0. So 25 on attempt 2. Okay, this last scramble was quite nice. It was 466 on the edge count, and I got a 22, but I knew I needed a 21 to tie the Canadian record single and average. So I found the 22 pretty early, but then I spent like the rest of the attempt just trying to cut it down to a 21, but to no avail. So there were 3 different 3-move edge orientations that I found, and then I wrote down a bunch of 4 movers. So these are mostly 4 movers here. The one I went with was on green front. I noticed that I have 4 bad edges in these spots. There are 2 different ways of doing this case in 3 moves. There's ULF, and then F2 R prime F. So the one I went with was ULF. Obviously there's all these extensions, like you can insert an L move or a B move, a B2. But yeah, I just went with the standard old ULF. After you switch to normal, you can do L prime D prime for RZP on red, orange. I noticed that I have this pair here and a second pair here, and this will come into play when I show one of the 19s that's findable, is you can actually insert an F2 right here. But besides the point, what I did was R F2 to bring a column next to this pair with this lone corner, just like on solve 1. That also aligns the middle slice edges, so I can just do U2 R, and then I did U prime for a 10 move DR. And not only is this 10 moves, but it's the R case. Like this is a case where you can just do half turns to sub to R. So it's the best HDR subset. I couldn't find anything on the normal side of the scramble, so I switched back to inverse. Back on inverse, you do ULF for the EO. Now this DR, I notice in 2 moves you can get DR corners, so D2L. Because that gives me 2 edges, I can cancel into like the 2 edge 5 move trigger. So I'll actually do D2L2, and now there are 4 different variations to get to HDR in 4 moves here. You can do F2U2 F2L, or you can do B2U2 B2L, or F2D2 B2R, or B2D2 F2R. So the one I went with was F2D2 B2, and then I went R prime. Then I noticed here, normally you would solve like red and orange, but here I can see that I pretty much have blocky fish on, or I have like a blocky fish push plus 2E2E. So on white and yellow. And what's more is the last move on normal was a U prime, meaning I could rewrite the slice quite easily if I solve the white and yellow slice instead. So I did L2, B2, U2, B2, which is just blocky fish plus 2C2E, or 2E2E. And then that was 22 to slice to, and it was like a +0 rewrite. So that's my 22. Now for the 19 that I missed. This was posted in Discord after the attempt. I don't know if anyone actually did this officially. I think one of the 19s that I saw Evan Brown do in his Reconstructions was actually on the same RZP as me, and then you switch to inverse, and then there's like 4 more moves for a 9-move 9-move DR. I don't know why I checked that. I was probably like too excited for the 10+1 that I found. But I think this one that I'm about to show is more reasonable. Basically, after you switch the EO on inverse, so you switch to normal, instead of doing L prime D prime for RZP, you can do L prime D, and it's obviously the same axis. So I still have like these 2 pairs that I used in my solution. But here, what you could do was an F2, which preserves those 2 pairs, but it feels kind of like a random move, but it preserves the 2 pairs. So I could see why someone would try it. Then U2 to form this column, bearing in mind that my middle slice edges are over here. And then I can just do a L prime B2 and then R U. And this is DR in 11, but it's the same subset. So it's essentially a DR extension, but a kind of complicated one. So I would like to be able to see stuff like this, but it was probably like just slightly out of reach for the level that I am at right now. Anyways, once you switch this, it's just 2 more moves to HDR. So D2 L prime. So that's an HDR in 13 moves. And then what's more is you can do R2 D2 for a 2E2E, which is extremely good. And it's helpful to know that there are these 2E2E algorithms that start with a move that's like parallel to the 4 edges that need to swap, but isn't like the layer involving any of the 2 of them. So like normally we know the U2, F2, U2, F2, U2 alg. But you can actually start like a 6-move 2E2E with a D2. So this would be canceling into that. Then I could go F2, D2, and then B2, U2, B2.